Today we're going over chapter 21 of Turin Turambar. If you're new here, welcome to Heart of a Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and nothing else. Ignore other videos. We only talk about Lord of the Rings. So let's get started. So we last left off, Huron has been taken captive into Angband. He and his family have all been cursed by Morgoth, and he's forced now to sit in this stone chair in a high peak and can see all that Morgoth can see and hear all that Morgoth can hear. And he's just cursed now to endure all the pain that his family endures. And Morwen, Huron's wife, is still in Hithlum, and here she is pregnant and has a 3-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son, Turin. Now, Morwen, living in Dorlomen, there are Easterlings now coming in and taking people captive and just pillaging and enslaving all sorts of people. And so Morwen sends Turin off to Doriath to get away from this in hopes to kind of keep him safe. And while Turin is gone, when he finally enters into Doriath, Morwen gives birth to her daughter, Nienor. Now, Turin lives with Thingol for 9 years, and it says that he lives a very, sad life. He's just a very sad and sorrowful child. And that during these 9 years, messengers are going back and forth from Doriath to Hithlum to Dorlomen to get messages back and forth between Turin and Morwen. And eventually, after these 9 years, there are no more messages. And so Turin now gets concerned, and he puts on the dragon helm, which was an heirloom of the House of Hador. And he now goes into battle to protect Doriath's borders with Beleg Strongbow. Now, after 3 years of serving with Beleg, he comes back to Doriath, and here there is an elf named Saros who is jealous of Turin because Thingol has accepted him as as a foster son. And so Saros is very jealous of this and makes fun of how Turin looks. He's coming back from this 3-year-long battle. He's unshaven. His clothes are all tattered and torn. He's looking pretty rough. And so Saros makes this comment of is this how all men where you live look? Are there women basically running around like deers with only hair covering them? Just really digging into him. And Turin has a very rash reaction to this, grabs the bottle and throws it at Saros, injuring her. And then later the next day, Turin goes to Saros, strips him down, beats him up, strips him down, and then chases him as if he's being hunted. And in this moment of terror and fear, Saros, he ends up tripping into a chasm and dies. Then Moblung comes up to Turin and sees what has happened, and he urges Turin to go to Thingol and tell him what has happened so that Thingol can pardon him. Thingol's not going to hold Turin accountable for this. Even though Turin is definitely the reason that Saros ran naked, it was an accident, and Moblung's Thingol will understand. But Turin is no, I can't do this. And he ends up fleeing because he's afraid of being in prison. He's scared that Thingol won't forgive him. And so he runs off and joins a band of outlaws. And when Thingol hears of what's happened, Thingol's oh yeah, I'll forgive him. It's no big deal. And so he sends Beleg after Turin to bring him so that Turin can come back to Doriath. During this time, though, Turin now takes on the name Nethan, or Nethan the Wronged. And while he's away from camp at one point, Beleg finds the group, and the outlaws catch him and are just beating him up, just making a mess out of things. And Turin finally comes back, sees that it's Beleg, forces them to release him, and then swears that he's not going to harm anybody else after this, only servants of Morgoth. And Belleg now tells Turin, like, hey, if you go back, Thingol will forgive you. It's no big deal. And Turin's like, no, I can't go back. I refuse. I'm going to stay here. So Belleg goes to Thingol, tells him that Turin doesn't want to come back, but that he wants to go and basically be a guard for Turin, make sure that Turin's okay. And Thingol's like, yeah, sure, that's great. Go ahead and take a weapon and some armor for you. And you can have whatever you want as long as it's not my sword. And Beleg's like, cool, I'm going to take Anglicel. And Melian tells him, like, be careful. Anglicel holds a lot of malice from its creator, Eol, and it may betray you. And Beleg's like, no, it's no big deal. It's a good weapon. This is the weapon I choose. And they're like, okay, go for it. So during this time, Turin is an outlaw. They're searching for a safe place. His men come up to 3 dwarves, and they're, attacking one another. And the group ends up taking captive a dwarf named Mim. Now, Mim offers, in exchange for his life, basically a safe place to live, and that his home is on Amon Ruth. And when they arrive there, they see that Mim's son, Kim, has died by an arrow. And so Mim's now mourning the loss of one of his sons. And Turin, in seeing this, takes pity and sorrow and says that truly this is a place place of ransom. And if he ever gains any sort of wealth or riches, that he would give that to Mim as repayment, as a gift for what has happened to his son, though it may not bring him happiness. So Turin and his people do stay with Mim. They learn about Mim, about other dwarves who have been banished. And Turin and Mim kind of become close, kind of become friends. They talk. It says they talk often, so I'm assuming they kind of become friends. And during this time, Beleg ends up finding Turin and bringing the dragon helm that Turin had once worn, as well as lembas bread that was given to him from Melian as a healing aid. Now, Mim hates Beleg. He doesn't like elves, and it seems a little bit like he's getting a little jealous of Beleg and Turin's relationship, so it's not great. Now, during this time, Morgoth is building his army back up, his influence is growing, and his army takes the land north of Doriath. So Beleg and Turin are now guarding Amon Ruth, and this guardship is starting to be spread around, and people are learning about Turin and Beleg, and they're flocking to them as captains. And so Turin renames himself Gorthel the Dreadhelm, and Mim ends up betraying Turin and his group of men because Mim gets captured by orcs, and he gives them the same spiel that, hey, you can come to my place and have a place of rest or whatever, but you need a promise not to hurt Gorthel. And the orcs are like, we know who Gorthel is. We know it's Turin. And yes, we agree we won't hurt him. And so the orcs get to Amon Ruth and they kill everybody. And they take Turin captive. Now, when Mim comes back to his home, he realizes that Beleg isn't dead. And he tries to kill him himself. But Beleg takes the sword away from Mim and basically just scares Mim away until Mim runs off, vowing his, vengeance against Beleg one day. So Beleg is injured, though, from the attack of the orcs, so he needs to take some time to heal, and he uses the lembas bread to do so. And then once he's able to move, he goes after Turin, and he's able to track part of the way where the orcs are going with Turin, and when he passes through Tarnufuin, he sees Gwyndor, who is now very aged for an elf. Elves, they get to a certain point and they kind of stop aging. But it says that Gwyndor, after his attack on Angband and trying to get into Morgoth's throne room, he was taken captive and he was enslaved to work in the mines as labor, and eventually was able to escape. And so when Beleg finds Gwendor, he has just escaped from Angband. And so he is just tired and worn down looking. And Beleg, is talking to him and aiding him. And Gwendor tells him, like, hey, I saw a man of Turin's description being taken by orcs in this direction. And so Beleg gives this inspiring speech to Gwendor to get him to join him to go after Turin. And so they catch up to the orcs that have camped for the night, and they are able to sneak in, get Turin, and carry him away. So when they get Turin away from the camp, Beleg uses Anglekel to cut Turin's shackles, Turin, however he's being tied up. And so when he goes to cut Turin's ropes, Anglekel decides, for whatever reason, fate was a part of this. Anglekel was just, I guess, being Eowl's weapon, and pricks Turin's foot when he's cutting. And in doing so, Turin wakes up, doesn't realize where he's at, doesn't realize what's going on. It's in the middle of the night, it's pitch dark, he can't see anything. All he sees is this dark figure over him. And so he grabs the sword out of Beleg's hands and kills Beleg. And in that moment, a big storm happens. There's lightning and it lights up the area. And Turin now sees what has happened. And in this big storm, it wakes up the orcs. The orcs get scared. They don't want to even bother looking for Turin, and they take off. Gwendor is now trying to convince Turin he needs to leave, because Turin, now realizing that he's killed Beleg, is grief-stricken and just feeling incredibly guilty about what has just happened. And so Gwendor is trying to convince him, like, we've got to go, we got to get out of here. Turin refuses to leave during the storm. So after the storm, Gwendor helps Turin bury Beleg. Turin's not saying anything this whole time. Gwendor leads Turin to a sacred spring protected by Olmo, and when Turin drinks from the spring, he kind of wakes up from this trance and composes the song for Beleg, and then Gwendor gives him Anglekel, and the two of them go to Nargothrond. And here, when they get there, everybody recognizes Gwendor to some extent. He's very old and changed, but it's still Gwendor. And Gwendor is about to introduce Turin to everybody, and Turin stops him and gives himself a new name, Garwain, the son of Umar, which is the bloodstained son of ill fate. Or hunter in the woods. And the elves of Nargothrond are like, okay, cool, we're not going to question that anymore. And then Anglekel is reforged into a new sword named Gurthing, later known as Mormigel the Black Sword. So here in Nargothrond, Gwendor had a girl he loved named Finduilas, who was Ordredreth's daughter. And at one point, she loved Gwendor as well. But now she's fallen in love with Turin. And Gwendor is like, he's not Baron. This is not a Baron and Luthien situation. Everywhere this man goes, doom follows. Do not love him. And Finduilas is just like, it doesn't matter. He'll never love me back and all of that. But in this process, Gwendor reveals that this is Turin, son of Hurin. And this gets back to Turin, who confronts Gwendor saying, how dare you give her my real name? And that basically he's brought doom their way by revealing who he is. And Gwendor says, like, doom doesn't come with you because of your name. Like, you are doom. Everywhere you go, doom follows. Like, it's not that doom's going to come because I said your name. You are doom. Now, Ordredreth also realizes who Turin is and convinces Turin to go back into battle against Morgoth and to drive the orcs out of the land. Turin's like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Maybe we should build this bridge over Nodrog so that we can get weapons back and forth more quickly. And Gwyndor this whole time is telling the king, like, this is a bad idea. Don't do that. Don't follow Turin. And this kind of causes Gwyndor to fall out of favor with Ordredreth. So now a message comes from Círdan to Nargothrond that Olmo is warning of an orc attack about to come, and that everybody in Nargothrond are strongly advised to stay where they are and to wait this out. And at the same time, the book also says that Morwen and Nienor are fleeing to Doriath to get away from everything that's going on in Hithlum. Now, Turin has become cocky and arrogant. He's been serving under Nargothrond for some time. He's coming to manhood here. He's gained the favor of the king. And for whatever reason, he feels like he's more important than a Valar. And so he ignores Olmo's advice and leads a force out of Nargothrond to go and fight Morgoth. Now, the orc army is being aided by Glaurung, the father of dragons. And because of this, this force is way too strong for Ordredreth and Turin and all of them. So Ordredreth is killed in the fight. Turin carries a very wounded Gwyndor out of the battle and into the woods, because Gwyndor has now been completely burned and marred up by Glaurung. And in his last moments, Gwyndor is like, I rue the day I met you. Trouble has only followed. But do this one good thing. Go back to Nargothrond and save Finduilas. Otherwise, you're doomed. That's it. And that Finduilas is the only thing standing between him and utter destruction. Now, the bridge that Turin has built is being used against him because the orcs are able to take this bridge right into Nargothrond. And when Turin arrives, because he's going after Finduilas, when he arrives, he meets Glaurung, who is standing in front of the doors of Nargothrond. And Turin, for a time, is withstanding the fire of Glaurung thanks to his dragon helm. But he looks into the eyes of Glaurung and falls under this spell, this enchantment, where he's just frozen in place, staring at Glaurung this whole time. And Glaurung is taunting him and telling him that, he's a terrible son, that Morwen and Nienor are in danger, that, they're in trouble, and that it's all Turin's fault for never going back to saving him. And this whole time that Turin is stuck looking at Glaurung, listening to all these taunts, in the side, he can hear all the cries of everyone being attacked in Nargothrond, and including Finduilas, who's being taken away by the orcs. And so he can hear her scream, and he's haunted by her scream after this. And so Glaurung holds on to Turin until Finduilas is gone. And when she does leave, Turin is now released from this stone trance and goes to attack Glaurung, who jumps out of the way and says, hey, I will give you your freedom, and you can go and find Morwen and Nienor. And basically telling him, like, he can either go save Morwen and Nienor and be a good son, or abandon them and go after Finduilas, a woman he doesn't even love. And so Turin is now at a crossroads. Turin is still under the influence of Glaurung's lies and chooses to go to save Morwen and Nienor, which is what Morgoth was wanting. He was wanting Turin to get out of the way, and that's exactly what happened. Glaurung did his job. And so Turin goes after Morwen and Nienor, and Glaurung destroys the bridge and stays at Nargothrond, being a dragon and sleeping on all the treasures of Nargothrond. So Turin now arrives back to Dorloman, and he's looking for a kinswoman of Hurin, Erin, who's married to Broda, which is an Easterling. So when he goes and finds Erin, he runs into Broda and a group of Easterlings, and he's asking, where his mother is. Broda tells him that, his mother and sister are in Doriath. They got out of here and were able to because of the Black Sword, because of Turin, essentially. And here, Turin is now like fully taken out of this trance and disillusion that he was under, Glaurung, and in a rage, he kills Broda and all the other Easterlings that are in this room, and he leaves. And he decides to leave Morwen and Nienor and Doriath. Like, if that's where they're at, then they're safe there. And he chooses to now go after Finduilas. So Turin goes south, meets the men of Brethil who have attacked and fought, or who have fought against the Orc Company that took Finduilas. And the Orc Company has killed everybody. Now, while the men of Brethil are fighting the orcs, they see Finduilas, who's dying, and Finduilas takes her last moments to tell the men of Brethil that when they see Turin, to tell him that Finduilas died here, that she hangs here. She had a bone to pick with Turin. She wanted him to know it. Now at this time, Turin is going by the name Mormegal. So she says, tell Mormegal that this is where she is. So when Turin sees where she has died, he's crying and grieving, and the men of Brethil realize, like, oh, this is Mormegal, and they take him in. Now their leader, Ethel Brandir, isn't real keen on this idea, and he kind of has a sense that something's not right with Turin, or with Mormegal. Now Ethel Brandir is a crippled man was born crippled, always crippled, and he's a big healer for the men of Brethil. And Turin here takes on a new name, Turambar, meaning Master of Doom, and now he wields a bow and arrow rather than his sword. So some of the survivors of Nargothrond, they travel to Doriath, and there they tell them that Mormegal is Turin. And in hearing that he was either killed or enslaved by Glaurung, because most of them saw him just in a stone trance under, looking at Glaurung, Morwen decides she's going to leave and go after Turin. Well, when she does this, Nienor is like, I'm going to go too. And so she follows behind. And Mablung is with Morwen. Now, Mablung was sent by Thingol to get them to return, but they don't, and so Mablung goes with them to Nargothrond as protection. And there they see Glaurung. And Glaurung has caused this great mist to, fill the air around Nargothrond, or around the river. And in the mist, Morwen gets lost, and there's no news of her ever again. Nobody knows what happens to her. And Nienor runs into Glaurung. She sees Glaurung, and she gets put under a spell by him that causes her to forget everything. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know how to speak. She's lost, confused. It's a mess. And so she is wandering, confused. And Mablung finds Nienor. But because she's confused, doesn't know who he is, isn't able to speak, she runs away completely scared of him. And during this time, Mablung is also being attacked by orcs, which is kind of a reason why Nienor is able to flee as well. And so she gets away from the orcs and the elves, and Mablung now has to go back to Thingol and tell them, I've lost them, I don't know what happened. And so they leave Doriath again to create a search party for Morwen and Nienor. So Nienor doesn't know who she is. She's lost. She wanders into Brethil, falls onto the grave of Finduilas. There's a big storm going on. She gets sick. Turin finds her and takes her in, is kind of taking care of her. She's comforted by Turin, who's now going by Turambar, and refuses to leave his side. But she can't speak or anything, so Turin gives her a new name, Nienil, or Tear Maiden, and he takes her to Brandir to be healed. So now Brandir is healing her from her illness, and the women of Brethil are teaching her the language, and she still can't remember anything. So now Brandir falls in love with Nienil, but she loves Turin, and Brandir reveals Turin's true identity to her, But she doesn't know the name. She doesn't recognize the name. It does give her kind of an odd feeling, but that's kind of the extent of that. So when Turin asks her to marry him, she says no because she kind of feels weird about it, and she's not really sure why. But 3 years later, Turin asks again, and she accepts, and they get married. Ooh. So now Glaurung is sending a group of orcs to fight the men of Brethil, and Turin takes up his sword and he goes and fights. A year later, Nienal is pregnant, and Turin now promises that he won't go out and attack unless the men of Brethil are directly being attacked. So shortly after this, Glaurung appears on the borders of Brethil, and Turin makes a plan to sneak up on Glaurung and kill him. So he wants to leave with Dorlas and Hunthor, who is a relative of Brandir. And Nienal leads a group of people to follow the three of them. Now, Brandir is trying to tell Bran, like, this is a bad idea, don't go do that, this is dumb, it's a dragon. And they all are, like, basically saying, you're a bad leader and back off. And instead they follow Nienal. And though Brandir is a crippled since birth, he follows the group as well. Now, Glaurung, it says that he's lying on his side in a gorge sleeping. And as they get closer, Dorlas is like, nah, I'm not going up against a dragon, and he bails. As while Turin and Hunthor are walking to the gorge to attack Glaurung, Glaurung wakes up, kind of crawls, moves around, and then during all this movement, stones caused by Glaurung moving fall and kill Hunthor. So now Turin is on his own to climb this gorge alone. And when he gets up to the gorge, Glaurung is sleeping, and he stabs Glaurung in the belly. And this causes Glaurung to throw himself just across the chasm. He's wriggling and squirming. He's in pain. And this whole time, Gersang is... Turin's sword is just still stuck in Glaurung's stomach. So when he finally, appears to have died, Turin has to climb up back to where Glaurung is, and he goes to remove the sword, and he ends up mocking Glaurung in this moment. And when he pulls the sword out of Glaurung's stomach, blood comes out of Glaurung, but it burns Turin. And Glaurung is just staring at Turin, and because of this, Turin ends up passing out, I guess, and falls on his sword. Not dead, though. It appears that he's dead, but he's not. So Nienal can no longer stand the waiting, and she goes to Glaurung, assuming that either he or Turin are dead at this point, and she is followed by Brandir. Well, Nienal finds Turin lying on the ground. She believes he's dead. Brandir is still a little ways back because he's crippled, so it's taking him a little bit longer. So he's still a little ways back. Nienal sees Turin and is mourning, and Glaurung sees Nienal crying and trying to tend to Turin's hands, and Glaurung stirs for the last time and sees Nienal and tells him, I'm so glad that you found your brother. And basically mocks Turin for being a coward to kill him while he's sleeping. And in this moment, Glaurung dies, and the spell of forgetfulness is removed from Nienal, who now realizes she's Nienor, realizes this is her brother Turin, and she freaks out. She realizes who he is and realizes who she is. Okay, so Brandir hears all that's happening, runs after Nienor, and Nienor flees, runs away, and throws herself into the gorge. Nobody can find her body after that. She's gone. Brandir, now knowing the truth of the situation, goes back to the people who are in Nenkirth and finds Dorlas in the woods who was hiding and kills him for his cowardice, which is the only person that that Brandir has killed ever is this cowardly man. And he goes back to his people and tells them that Turin is dead, Glaurung is dead, and that Nienor is actually Nienor, and that Turambar is actually Turin, and that they're siblings, and that it's all gross and weird, and the people are freaking out like this is disturbing. But Turin wakes up and walks to the people in the group, and everybody sees that Turin's alive, not dead, which automatically makes everybody not believe anything that Brandir has said. Turin's confused. He wants to know where his wife is. So Brandir says that she's dead, that was actually his sister. And Turin gets really upset by all of this, ends up taking Gorthang and kills Brandir for his lies and spreading Glaurung's lies and rumors, and curses him, kills him. And so now Turin goes to the grave of Findulas and cries, where he meets Moblung and his company, who have come to aid and kill Glaurung. So Turin, however, asks Moblung to tell him about his mother and sister, and Moblung explains that Morwen was lost and that Nienor lost her memory and ran away, and Turin now realizes that what Brandir and Glaurung had said was true. And Turin curses Doriath, runs away from Moblung and his company, pulls out Gurthang, asks Gurthang if it will kill him, and the sword speaks and whispers to Turin that he will gladly kill Turin just to get the taste of Beleg and Brandir, an innocent man that he has killed, out of his mouth, like off of his blade. And so Turin sticks Gurthang into the ground by the hilt and then just steps into it and just kills himself that way. And he just throws himself onto his sword. Moblung then arrive, like they catch up to Turin, who's, run away from them. And they, are able to learn about what has happened to Nienor, what the heck just happened with Turin. Moblung now feels terrible because he feels like he is part of the reason why Turin died, why someone that he loves had died. And so Moblung takes Turin and buries him with Gurthang, who's now broken. And they sing a song of sorrow for the children of Hurin. And they carve Turin and Nienor's name into stone as a burial mound. But no one's ever able to find Nienor. Nobody knows what happened to her body. So that is this chapter. And oh my goodness, I read each of these chapters about 2 or 3 times to prepare for these videos. And this one was just icky to get through. And I really want to know, like, what was Tolkien going through when he wrote this chapter? This is, man, because in reality, like, as far as storytelling goes, the only thing of substance that came out of this was the death of Glaurung. We don't know, as far as the Silmarillion goes, I don't know about Unfinished Tales, but we don't know Nienor's child. I don't even know if she actually had the child. We just know that she was pregnant. So, why? What was the purpose of this? I don't know. This just seemed like Tolkien had to have been going through something. Either he was dealing with his own concept of like fate and free will. I don't know. But this was just a wild ride, and it took me a little while to get through because it just felt so icky and weird and very frustrating. Every decision that Turin made was so frustrating. He's supposed to be the hero of this chapter, and yet at no point am I rooting for him because it's like, you are making so many dumb choices. Just stop. Please just stop. It was just so hard to get through this. Oh my goodness. But we got through it. And we'll probably be talking about it on Tuesday because I have a recipe for it. So that'll be fun. Oh, whatever. I hope you guys enjoyed this video even a little bit. It was a long one, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed week. And may your homes be filled with so much food and cheer. Bye.